Welcome again to another edition of famous World War II airfields as they were during the war and as they are now in Microsoft Flight Simulator. This time we look at the Japanese island of Iwo Jima and its current airport RJAW Iwo Jima, which is now a Japanese military airfield. Hopefully you will enjoy a bit of the history of World War II Iwo Jima and also find an interesting place to fly in the sim. And I have a surprise challenge or mission for you at the end. The Battle of Iwo Jima was one of the deadliest World War II battles in the Pacific arena. After very considerable preliminary bombing, the American invasion force found a very heavily fortified island, with the Japanese entrenched in miles of tunnels and caves in the soft volcanic soil. The battle took much longer than expected and resulted in much higher casualties than expected. Also, the military usefulness of the island after the American victory was less than expected. Given all this, there was considerable debate later about the overall worth to the war effort of taking over the island. The Battle of Iwo Jima was important because 1. It was a great symbolic victory, being the first invasion of the so-called Japanese home islands. 2. It stopped Japanese fighter aircraft from the island attacking American bombers and bases. 3. It brought American bomber and fighter escort aircraft within closer range of the Japanese mainland. 4. It provided emergency landing for bombers operating from outer islands. And 5. The iconic flag-raising picture by photographer Joe Rosenthal against the background of much death and heroism became the symbol of the American Marine Corps and a source of great pride for the nation. And there is Iwo Jima, strategically placed halfway between Japan and the Mariana Islands, where most of the United States Air Force was based at the time of the battle. Here is a basic map of the battle. Airfields number 1 and 3 are now abandoned, and number 2 in the centre has become RJAW. The US Marines landed on the south coast beaches shown in green and steadily pushed their way north. The location of the famous photograph is on top of the volcanic mountain, bottom left-hand side of the island. And here is a more detailed map of the battle for those who want a bit more information. Airfield number 3 at the top right hand side of the island was never completed. Here is a wartime aerial view looking east with airfields numbers 1, 2 and 3 respectively from bottom right hand side to top left hand side. This is just a portion of the massive US Marine invasion force. Here we see the first flag raising. And here the second staged flag raising later the same day, which has become an iconic World War II photo. This is the first American B-29 Super Fortress aircraft emergency landing on South Field, even before the entire island was secured. Just a few American P-51 Mustangs parked at South Field. And a few more taking off from Iwo Jima. What happened to them all, eh? Well, here we are in the sim at RJAW Iwo Jima, which is now a Japanese military airport. We are in the new Payware Top Rudder 103 Solo Ultralight from Asobo, just for a slow ride. By the way, Iwo Jima Airport is not yet in the base sim, so you need to install the Butte freeware add-on by artist JP from flightsim.to. The amphibious invasion of Iwo Jima by US Marines was referred to as Operation Detachment. It involved over 400 US ships and over 70,000 Marines against about 20,000 Japanese. The Japanese never expected to win because by that late stage of the war, their navy and air power were spent forces and the Japanese troops on the island were without any further support or reinforcements, but they were determined to fight to the last man, which they virtually did. A handful of survivors were even discovered still hiding out in the numerous caves and tunnels 3 or 4 years after the war ended. The US Marines landed all along the beach coming up in front of the aircraft. The beach looks nice and golden in the sim, but in real life it is black volcanic stuff. The whole island is actually the raised middle part of an underwater volcano, still with ongoing small eruptions on and around the island every year. Mount Suribachi at the southern end of the island is coming up. It is the highest point on the island, and it is where the USA flag raising photo was taken. That photo that became one of the most famous images of World War II. It was actually the second flag raising, because earlier in the day, at the first flag raising, a newspaper photographer was not available and the flag was a little too small. There is now a monument or memorial on top of the mountain commemorating the battle. There are various other memorials scattered around the island, but none of these memorials are properly depicted in the sim, unfortunately. There's the long beach on the right where the US Marines landed. And there it is again. And just ahead of the aircraft, between the airport and the coast on the right hand side, some of the most intense fighting on the island took place around so-called Hill 382, which would become to be known later on as the meat grinder. Oh dear. The Japanese were slowly but surely driven to the northern end of the island. That's Kitano Point, on the other side of the airport from the aircraft, where a final, desperate banzai attack sealed their fate. that's the end of the main video coming up. Hope you liked it. Let me know if you would like more, or if you would like to request a particular airfield to be covered. But now, if you're up for a challenge, keep watching after I land for the next video. And now a challenge or mission for you, just for a bit of fun. Get the nice freeware add-on C-17 Globemaster aircraft by a group of artists at flightsim.to. Imagine you are piloting an American aircraft back to your base in the Marianas, south of Iwo Jima, after a mission over Tokyo. You have been hit and you are damaged. You are approaching North Iwo Jima Island at 9,000 feet, 42% engine revs at about 260 knots. Right over the top of North Iwo Jima, all 4 engines fail and roll back to idle. It's impossible to land on steep mountainous North Iwo Jima, so you have to glide to the main Iwo Jima Island for an emergency landing. Can you make it? And there are the engines rolling back to idle now. I'll trim out some of the video on the way to keep it short, but I'll show you how I went at the end. You can't land to the left, and you can't land back there. Can't land on the right, so on to Iwo Jima. Here I am on final. Actually ended up coming in too fast, so I needed some quick S-turns and the speed brakes, but even with that came in too fast and did a bounce, but made it safely, so that's the main thing.
1,000. 500, 400, 300, 200, 100, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
So, give it a go yourself, and perhaps tell us how you went in the comments. If you find 9,000 feet to start with too easy, then try 8,000 feet as I did later on. From 8,000 feet I just made it onto the island, but not the actual runway. So have fun, and thanks for joining me. Cheers.